make the assumption that it's fixed, that they can do whatever they want, and if it breaks or if they get exploited, someone else is responsible for addressing that issue and getting them their $50 back, or saving their credentials. At the end of the day, the common consumer needs to take some level of responsibility. They must be liable for something. Something along the way. Common passwords, for God's sake, anything. But we cannot keep passing that off onto big business or the security people to address that issue, because we're just not getting anywhere. 90% of what is out there today is a common user. My mother is on Facebook feeding some dog that I have no idea. I swear to God, it's not a joke. I swear, it makes me sick. She's a senior citizen, and she changed her flight because she had to feed a dog or else it would run away. I didn't know what she was talking about. But this is what I'm saying. And if her dog ran away, that was an issue. God forbid if she couldn't feed the dog because she had a security exploit. But at the end of the day, there must be some level of responsibility for a common user for doing irresponsible acts. And that's really where we need to get to. We can't just all pass that along the way. And I get it. I want my car to work. I get what you're saying. But we have this poor gentleman here who's been exceedingly patient.
Okay, so we've been discussing what the users should do, what the security researchers should do. I have a question to the panel. So are we going to see a day wherein the companies are going to have a scoreboard, let's say, in which they say, okay, we knew about this vulnerability on this day, we are working on this patch. We knew about this vulnerability on this day, we are still working on the patch. And maybe to help all those imbeciles who want some fame, also put their names there up. Is that going to happen?
So you're talking about public, kind of like a big matrix? Here's Microsoft, here's Red Hat, here's blah, blah, blah.
From the vendors themselves. Okay, this is a scoreboard or scorecard, and we are working for the last so many days.
I mean, frankly, as far as attribution goes, Microsoft and other vendors put out a release, they say, and credit goes to, whoever today it was from ISS. People get that credit. The problem is that, that's one issue. The credit's there. As far as vendor scoreboards go, it'll look really good. I don't think it'll happen because a lot of vendors aren't going to do it, and it does Microsoft no good to say, well, we had this level of vulnerability, because how do you equate something that's like a minor fix for some crappy program that they have that nobody uses compared to a fundamental flaw in like Microsoft, or let's say a fundamental bug in Microsoft, like Windows? There's a difference because it's not all vulnerabilities are the same, and it's not all like you're going to replace, critical vulnerabilities are fixed within X number of days. That could happen, but maybe you'll get Microsoft doing it. Maybe you'll get Sun doing it. Well, does Sun exist?
Kind of all be in the same window frame there?
Yeah.
Not 5 years, but maybe a year?
But the problem is that nobody is going to do it when they suck. You're not going to see Mac or Apple do that, like Mac OS was patched within so many days.
So I think there's also a fundamental oversimplification of all criticals are in this some same category here. An architecture critical is going to take a lot more work, a lot more testing than a one-off implementation error. And they can both be rated as critical impact, but they are not equal by any means. Similarly, a vulnerability in a shared library. This is absolutely not all vulns are created equal, and you cannot make some arbitrary mandatory window for severity, because that's not actually the operative. That's not the operative in determining how long it might take to address a particular issue.
Can we have our mic back?
Yes.
Oh, you want?
No,
Andrea has a question.
I just want to keep it up.
Andrea's got a question.
You look frightened.
It's been a long day.
It has been. Okay, so we've talked about personal responsibility. We've talked about the company responsibilities on the programming side. What do you guys think about the idea that some governments have that the patches should go to the government first and the government can patch their computers first before the rest of the user community patches? And I won't say what nationalities do that.
No, I'll take that because, frankly, the government has a, I'm going to say a stupid philosophy that, most of the critical infrastructure will remain in private hands, and that if the government says, well, let us fix government computers first, In many cases, I don't care about some of the computers in the government. I care about more of the critical infrastructure computers that are left vulnerable because the government says, oh, we'll let the critical infrastructure companies do whatever the hell they want. You know, I mean, holding it back for just the government, I mean, it would be nice maybe for some of the, well, frankly, I would like to assume it would be unnecessary for all the computers that are out there, like on critical systems, because they should not be attached to online networks, but that's a separate issue.
So Andrew, was your question not so much just government, but critical infrastructure maybe? Or is it across the board? So SCADA, all of that, right? Oof.
Oh yeah, if it's SCADA, just write it off, it'll never get
Yeah, so a lot of theoretical models will say, you know, well, there's us and there's them. There's government and there's not government. There's important and there's not important. And, you know, theoretical models are nice and, you know, slick, but everything is blurry these days. You know, you have your purely public assets. You have your public-private assets. You have your mostly private but highly regulated assets. You have your mostly private, used to be highly regulated, but a little less now assets. And the idea that there's a line is, there is no line. And that's the problem. Or not problem, but that's, you know, ultimately the idea that, you know, government should patch first. What does that mean is really a question. And it means nothing.
And when you say highly regulated, geographical location, regulations don't cross boundaries very well. Of course, we're not on the same sheet of music, right? Question. He said, that's all right. He said it a couple times.
So if you did give it to governments first, who here thinks that the government could actually keep the secret? And second, which government?
You mean which government agency or what?
No, there's 190 governments, so you know, even more than that. I wanted to just chime in on one of the things that the gentleman over here said, because I think your question was not correctly understood, or maybe I understood it wrongly. But what you were describing looks more like a database of patches under development, so that you know that something is coming up. That was what I heard from your question. And actually some companies, primarily vulnerability research companies, are doing that. Yeah, that's the only one that deals with another huge company that takes a lot of time to fix bugs. So yeah, and let's leave it at that. But
You have a question?
No, he's saying
You're telling me to shut up in 5 minutes?
yep.
I'm doing my job.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks. So regarding that question, that kind of makes sense. The problem is except from putting some pressure and not very effective at all on the vendor, what contribution does that give to the average user or administrator? Really none, because if you're an administrator and you're administering, let's put the elephant on the table, the Oracle patches. You already know that in a quarter you will get another bunch of patches. You already know that there's a lot of vulnerabilities that have already been disclosed to them and are not patched yet. It's enough that you attend any course by David or by Alexander Kornbrust, and you will see 0 days, or even discover 0 days as part of the course, because it's very easy to find out vulnerabilities in some components of that database. And I'm not deliberately bashing Oracle. It's just like, because it's probably the type of list of vulnerabilities that spurred your question. What does that list? What good does that list do? Not much, in my opinion. I don't know, but
No, it's up to you.
No, go ahead.
We only have 5 minutes.
I know. So we wanted to kind of 3 minutes. Okay, so we're gonna have to talk at Pam speed, right? Okay. So just real quickly, a standards guidance kind of perspective, right? So putting standards or guidance around anything, let's just say, like you seem to have a very well-developed, you know, historical practice, and Microsoft, we all know, does for vetting and distributing, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, are we evolving too quickly to even adhere to a standard or a guideline? if you will, because things are evolving so fast, right? So we're having a hard time keeping up with deployment, when to talk about it, what to disclose, what to test, what to evaluate, who to notify, when to notify, is it government, is it not, is it big business? So at the end of the day, will we ever get to a collective understanding on what responsible disclosure is and what the process is associated with it? We're always, I think, going to kind of keep peddling to get there, right?
Okay, so Pam, the answer is no. There will not be a responsible disclosure until it's regulated. The fact of the matter is there's too many players out there to both do it as a corporation, to respond quickly with their own, fixing their own things, as we've seen with these ATMs, as we've seen with Mac compared to everybody else with DNS vulnerability. There's not going to be a consolidated way. All of a sudden, Juniper hires the guy that disclosed Cisco vulnerability who worked at ISS. Then they have now it's me, and they change their mind, so all of a sudden it's okay to pull presentations when they had much more time to theoretically fix the thing. So there's not going to be anything, because right now it's a should, it's not a must, and people do whatever they damn well please when they don't have to do anything else.
I think that, I think that there's absolute room for evolution here. That's what we've been doing in this industry, right? We've been learning from, from the mistakes of the past, the mistakes of ourselves and others. And there's room for evolution and efficiencies, that can be shared among, all of the different roles in the disclosure. I've been working on the ISO standard for, it was originally started as ISO standard for responsible disclosure, proposed by the Canadian national body, and I've been working on that as the U.S. subject matter expert for that particular draft for the past 3 years. Has that draft changed a lot in the past 3 years? Absolutely, and in fact, because of a suggestion from Jake Koons from Open Security Foundation after we talked at the RSA panel, after the RSA panel on disclosure that I was on, we were able to bring the idea of dropping the word responsible from the title of that ISO draft, and that actually was ratified in April of this year. So now it's no longer responsible vulnerability disclosure, it's just called vulnerability disclosure. But the point is, that's all evolving. There's some standardization efforts. Is it going to catch everybody? Absolutely not. But we're all trying to move towards a better solution than the one we have now, and it's going to take all of us.
There are a lot of things we could talk about in terms of the definitions of disclosure and the agreements of disclosure, in terms of what is done, in terms of what we call it. I got to be honest, I do think de-emotionalizing the subject is unquestionably a good thing, but, there's no doubt in the public's mind that there's an irresponsible way to disclose a vulnerability. Hey, I'm going to disclose something by hacking into every website on the planet and publishing, every website is just the exploit. This is clearly an irresponsible way to do things. There's no question that there's an irresponsible way. There's always been a question that there's a responsible way. So I have to say, I'm kind of nervous about losing the possibility, the admitted and accepted and proclaimed value of disclosure. When we called it responsible disclosure, we at least knew there was a good way to do it. After, I like the de-emotionalization, but I'm a little worried about the loss that it cost us. The real question at the end of the day is timelines, though. What is the appropriate timeline going to be? As a statement of fact, unquestionably, not all bugs take the same amount of time, but just as equally as a statement of fact, bugs can't have an indefinite timeline to be fixed, or else they just won't be.
Right, because they evolve, right? By the time you fix it, it's morphed into something else. So just quickly, and then I'll let each one of you do your closing comments, if you will. When you talked about it has to be regulated, right? We were talking about, I actually have to agree with you, because I'm just going to point out a couple of quick things from talking from what used to be standards and what used to be guidelines, which are now legislation, right? Let's talk about PCI. It was a standard and a guideline. You didn't really have to do it. And if you violated PCI, you'll get a fine. Well, we all know that those little fines didn't happen until, Heartland came about, right? The big old breach there. So at the end of the day, PCI was a guideline and a standard. It was not a legislation. You didn't go to jail for it, if you will. That now has legislation backing. In the state of Nevada, actually, you must be PCI compliant or you break the law, per se. The other thing that I want to bring to attention is HIPAA is another one. It was a standard and a guideline. And now we have HIPAA high trust. So really, we had nice